been worried about seismic safety and earthquake engineering for a long time. And I'm glad to share with you the thoughts that I have about functional recovery. I think this is a great opportunity. I want to thank the organizers for putting it together, for all of us to come together and listen and learn from each other and figure out how to tailor the efforts we do, which are all extremely important and all very tailored to our areas of interest, to follow this roadmap. So it's important that we figure out how to collaborate, we figure out how to work consistently, and if we do, then our message is going to be better heard, because my overarching concern is that we're not being heard very well. Okay, what is it? What is this functional recovery thing? And what I'd like to suggest to you is it's a 60-year conversation among design professionals and occasionally their clients about when a properly designed and construction building will be able to return to service. And it's interesting because it is kind of a private conversation that we have amongst ourselves as design professionals. And then those of us who are willing to do it have this conversation with our clients. And there's many design professionals in this room that do this sort of thing. But we pretty much keep this as a secret to ourselves, but we've got it built into what we're doing. And for those of you who like to say that we've talked about this before, we've been here before, we've done this, I'll have to agree with you, we've been doing it for a long time. You know, the original expectation when we started designing, we as a profession to start designing for earthquakes, was that we could avoid damage. And that was kind of the idea until we got to the, I would suggest, the 1950s, when we realized from the earthquakes that were occurring that we couldn't avoid damage. And then I think we started talking about public safety and talking about basic safety and life safety. And that idea that has kind of permeated the development of our codes seems to be part of the conversation we have, is our codes only cover life safety. But as a matter of fact, when we got into the 60s, the CALBO group put together a blue book. They like to talk about the performance of buildings for various levels of earthquakes. And then they in fact talked about buildings that were designed to those criteria would not be damaged in frequent earthquakes, would only have moderate non-structural damage, and would actually be usable in moderate-sized earthquakes. And then in major earthquakes, they wouldn't collapse. Never said much about whether it'd be repairable or not. That was kind of where we were in the 60s. In the 70s, that morphed after the San Fernando earthquake. We lost our hospitals, and we began thinking that we needed to do something about having our essential facilities available to us. Again, it was a quiet conversation. We built it into our codes, but in fact, we created this group of essential facilities that under design level earthquakes would remain operational, certainly very much a functional performance level, a functional recovery level. We get into the 1990s after the Northridge earthquake, we started getting very serious about talking about performance-based design, and a group of us got together at CALBO. There's lots of activities that are going on. I can only share the ones that I'm familiar with. Vision 2000 was written, published in '95, and in there we talked about needing to talk about various levels of earthquakes. We called them frequent, occasional, rare, and very rare. And we needed to talk about ground performance levels, and we coined the terms collapse, near collapse, life safety operational, fully operational. We had a scale. All this came together and became part of the conversation. It turned into what we were dealing with existing buildings with ASCE 41 now. We talk about all this. We have the performance levels. We now have multiple standards, codes, rating systems that support and supporting infrastructure systems that are all aiming toward individually thinking about performance, hazard levels, functional recovery. In a sense, you could say we got this covered and we're doing good. We know what we're doing, but at the same sense, there's new lessons that have been learned. I'd like to suggest to you that 2005 with the Katrina hurricane, that event showed us we also needed to consider community recovery. And I know that this session is not about community resilience, but we really need to turn around and think about how our thoughts and where we have brought our codes in terms of functional recovery in existing buildings, quietly talking to ourselves, doing what we believe was the right thing for our communities, how that fits together with community recovery. And I think what Katrina showed us is that it was important for us to look at how individual buildings were gathered together with infrastructure systems to support communities and get them to recover. Katrina was just the first of a number of events that have occurred that have shown us this, and it has stimulated, I think, a very large discussion. It's more than what an individual owner would care about in their individual building. It's about what a community needs to care about. I'll suggest to you that community recovery is at the heart of community resilience, and it really provides an expanded basis for setting functional recovery standards. So if we're going to have functional recovery standards, we need a basis for setting those standards. I'll suggest to you a basis that's different than what we're doing today for individual buildings within our quiet conversation. It requires thinking about communities in terms of their social institutions. And this graphic is from the NIST Community Resilience Planning Guide. It talks about the basic institutions within a community: government, family, health, education, economy, community service, media, religious and cultural beliefs. That's how we decided to organize a description of an entire community. It talks about what the built environment needs to do to support those services, and then as a community looks to recover, as a community is striving to recover, what services do they need in order to do that, and what do those services need from the built environment. I think that the focus that we need to have now is that we need to have an eye toward that big picture about what our communities need in order to recovery, so that we can think about what we're building for new buildings. I think functional recovery is best defined as a contributor to community resilience, not just a measure of the resilience of individual buildings. And I really want you to think about that for a minute, because much of the conversation and much of the thinking and much of the talking that's going on is all about the resilience of individual buildings. And we really need to think about functional recovery as more than individual building resilience. We need to think about it as the tool that we're going to use that's going to deliver community resilience about us. Community resilience is about quick social and economic recovery. The community needs to decide how quickly they want to recover. Of course, they all want to recover very quickly. And recover means that all these social institutions are put back in place. Functional recovery of buildings and supporting lifeline infrastructure is part of that process. It's not the entire process. There are plenty of other things that need to go on: financing, recovery. There needs to be dealing with vulnerable populations. There needs to be dealing with existing buildings. A lot of things have to fit together to get this to work, but buildings and supporting lifeline systems is a key part. A fully functional building performance would be ideal. We all agree on that. It would be just wonderful if we could just get everything built so it's not damaged and it can be fully used. But we know it's not practical. And I say it's not practical because we've got decades of experience in knowing that our clients and our communities and our legislature is not interested in requiring that level of construction. It's too expensive in their mind. They don't understand the value that goes along with the cost. And when you don't understand the value that goes along with the cost, then you have to make a decision that is not worth it, okay? So we know we're doing an uphill battle with fully functional building performance, which would be ideal, but we haven't demonstrated the value of it. I like to suggest to you, and this is right in line with the Community Resilience Planning Guide and with the work that we did at SPUR and the work that's been done in Oregon and different places where community resilience is being dealt with, is the focus should be on designing for just-in-time recovery. And just-in-time recovery means that we understand how a community recovers after a major event, and we look at what's necessary in time, what buildings and infrastructure systems are necessary in time to recover. Recognize that emergency response facilities are needed within the first few hours, if not days. The workforce needs to be cared for within the next few weeks so we can put a workforce back together, and the economic reconstruction of the community and the commercial reconstruction all needs to come after that and can come in months of time. Getting to where we're talking about functional recovery in terms of how it supports community resilience. Going forward, I think what we need to do is adapt to what we're all doing with our new building design criteria. It's all going on right now, in a way that generates common understanding, public understanding, and looks forward to community resilience programs. Again, I'll stay with new buildings, and I'll stay with code design criteria, but the two things that I'm talking about here is that we need to do it in a way that generates common public understanding and looks forward to community resilience programs. Generating public understanding means we need to be transparent about what we're achieving. We need to walk away from the quiet conversation we're having with ourselves and our building officials and our public officials and our clients, and we need to be transparent. We need to declare, we need to talk about it. I look forward to the day, I hope I live long enough that when an earthquake like Ridgecrest occurs, that they actually talk about performance and what the performance was expected and what the design level was, as opposed to 7.1, why didn't we have more damage? I think that quiet conversation is the problem that we have delivered to ourselves that has caused that to occur. How do we get there? Well, I think we need to have common hazard levels. Now I'm talking about all the programs, lifeline programs, building codes. If you look out across there, we talk about small, medium, and large earthquakes usually. We don't talk about them in a way that's in a common sense. And I think we need a common set of definitions and a common set of hazard levels that we can tailor our work to, or at least interpret our work in terms of. In the NIST project, we talked about routine, design, and extreme level events as our 3 levels. And we chose those words because they were understandable. There's lots of other words that we can use. We can talk about hazard levels, we can talk about risk, we can talk about functional levels, but I think that we need to talk in terms that the community can understand. We need to define and declare performance levels that include expected time needed for reoccupancy and functional recovery. And of course, that's what's written into the reauthorization language on purpose. That's why I'll honestly say we wrote it in there that way, because we need to get this conversation to move in that direction. In the NIST work, we followed what the recommendations that SPUR made and the Resilient City work that was done in 2009. And we talked about declaring performance levels in terms of safe and operational. These are words that people can grab onto and understand. Safe and usable during repairs, safe and not usable, and then unsafe. And talk about the time frames in terms of days, weeks, and months. A lot of concern about talking that clearly about transparently about what's going to happen. But the truth of the matter is once we talk about that, we set our standards for that, it really clarifies the expectation to our clients and to our communities, and it also provides the kind of definition of the state of the practice that we need to protect ourselves from liability. All this needs to be done in recognition of the siloed work that's going on right now by different organizations and different code bodies and different groups that are working on different kinds of hazards. All that needs to happen, but we need to be collaborative and we need to have some common basis. Okay, if we do it, if we coordinate and collaborate our efforts, we will enhance public understanding and support. Better buildings of known capability will be constructed, and the known capability, I think you understand, is a big thing that I'm trying to push here. Better post-earthquake understanding of what happened will also occur. If we have actually introduced into our communities a conversation about performance levels and design levels, earthquake levels, we can talk about an event like Ridgecrest as being an event that was somewhere between routine and design, depending on where you were, and very quickly moved to routine as you just moved a few miles away from the areas of strongest shaking, and that the expected performance was safe and usable during repairs, or safe and operational, and that's what we would strive for. Those are good marks for community resilience. We had examples of things that didn't work as well, and that's fine. It's going to give us a better understanding of the shortcomings of the existing buildings. Because as soon as we set a standard of how we talk about things, instead of just saying we're going to build back better, if we talk about building back to specific hazard levels and specific performance levels, now we have a way of distinguishing new buildings from old buildings and old buildings from older buildings and buildings that were built by progressive engineers that understood what they were doing as opposed to those who were following code provisions that were inadequate. It gives us an opportunity to do that. It gives our infrastructure planners that are working on these areas benchmarks of what they need to target for. And of course, the ultimate goal is to encourage some kind of community resilience planning like has gone on in various areas in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Oregon, and other places. That level of transparency is what's needed. So to me, we're talking about the functional recovery, talking about functional recovery in terms of performance levels, in terms of hazard levels, in terms of transparency, and in a way that supports the community resilience planning that's ongoing. Thank you very much.